How could you bring this shame on our family, Emma? My dad thundered, his voice filling every corner of the kitchen. He stood at the head of the table, his face lined with disappointment and fury. Eliza leaned casually against the counter, arms folded, her lips pressed into a thin line as she watched the scene unfold. I sat there, stunned, my heart racing, the weight of their judgment suffocating me. My name is Emma Morgan. I'm 26 years old, and tonight, my world is unraveling. My father, the only parent I have left, looked at me as though I was a stranger. Eliza, my twin sister, the one who always managed to come out on top, didn't even try to defend me. And now, accused of something I didn't do, I realized I was completely alone. It all started when court orders arrived at my father's house, each one more alarming than the last. They claimed I had defaulted on multiple loans, accounts I had no memory of opening. In the past weeks, I had received some weird calls talking about loans that I was supposed to repay. I dismissed them as scam calls, but the accusations were official, and the weight of the legal threats hung over me like a storm cloud. That's when everything truly fell apart. I didn't do it, Dad, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I don't know how this happened, but it wasn't me. Eliza shifted, her eyes glinting as she finally spoke. Come on, Emma, are you seriously denying it? Everyone knows your name is on the documents, she said, her voice laced with pity. Why don't you just tell the truth and stop dragging this out? My dad's expression hardened as he looked at me. So what are you saying? This is all a coincidence? The loans, the complaints, the accusations from people in those places? Why would they target you for no reason? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Because someone framed me, Dad. Someone used my name. I don't know how, but I swear to you I didn't do any of this. My eyes darted to Eliza, who raised her hands in mock surrender. Framed? Really? Eliza said, her tone dripping with disbelief. Who would go through all that trouble, Emma? And why you, of all people? This sounds more like an excuse than anything else. Dad shook his head, pacing the room. Emma, I've always tried to be patient with you, but this is too much. You're not a child anymore. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Until you can, you're not welcome here. The words hit me like a slap, and I felt the ground beneath me shift. Dad, you're kicking me out, I whispered. I stood there, frozen, as my father's words sank in. Eliza sighed dramatically and shook her head. I hate to see this happen, but maybe some time away will help you reflect, Emma, she said, her voice honeyed with false concern. I looked at her, my throat tightening with anger and disbelief. You're loving this, aren't you? I said, my voice low. You've been the perfect one your whole life, and now you're watching me take the blame for something I didn't do. Eliza isn't the problem here, Emma, Dad snapped. You are. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Pack your things and leave tonight. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. My chest ached as I turned away, blinking back tears, knowing that no matter what I said, no one would believe me. I packed my bags in silence, each item a painful reminder of the life I was leaving behind. The walls of my childhood room felt foreign now, as if they belonged to someone else, a version of me that no longer existed. Eliza leaned casually against the doorway, watching me with an unreadable expression. I wish it didn't have to be this way, she said softly, her tone laced with sympathy that didn't quite feel real. I kept my back to her, shoving clothes into my duffel bag. Yeah, me too, I muttered, my voice heavy with defeat. It's just everything looks so bad right now, Emma. Maybe some time away will help you figure out how this happened, she added. I froze for a moment, gripping the edge of the dresser. I didn't do this, I said quietly. I don't know how or why it's happening, but I didn't do it. Eliza sighed, stepping back into the hall. I hope you figure it out, for your sake. Really, I do. Her words echoed in my mind as I zipped up my bag and walked out of the room, unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. But for now, all I could do was leave. The night air was cold and sharp as I stepped outside, my duffel slung over one shoulder. The house behind me, once a place of warmth and memories, now loomed like a shadow, filled with accusations and betrayal. I paused at the edge of the driveway, glancing back at the window where the light still glowed faintly. Dad hadn't even come out to see me leave. He'd made his decision and didn't care to look back. Eliza's voice echoed in my head. "I hope you figure it out for your sake." Her words felt hollow, yet they clung to me like a thorn. How had things gotten so twisted? Why was everything pointing to me when I hadn't done anything wrong? As I walked down the street, clutching the strap of my bag, I told myself one thing. I might not have answers now, but I wouldn't stop until I found them. Something didn't add up, and I was going to figure it out, even if no one believed me. The bus station was nearly empty when I arrived, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the tiled floor. I bought a one-way ticket to the nearest city, my fingers trembling as I handed over the cash. The clerk barely looked at me, sliding the ticket across the counter without a word. I found a seat in the corner, away from the few scattered passengers. The reality of it all began to sink in as I stared at the crumpled ticket in my hand. I was alone now, no home, no family to fall back on. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. How could everything fall apart so quickly? Who would go to such lengths to frame me, and why? The engine of an approaching bus rumbled in the distance, pulling me from my thoughts. As the vehicle rolled to a stop, I tightened my grip on my bag and stood. This wasn't the life I'd envisioned, but it was the one I had to face now, one step at a time. The first few days after leaving home were a blur of cheap motel rooms, instant noodles, and restless nights. I was barely holding it together, my mind spinning with everything I'd lost. But staying in bed and wallowing wasn't going to solve anything. I needed to survive, and that meant finding a job, any job. I landed a position at a small clothing store downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something to keep me busy and bring in a paycheck. My co-worker, Mia, was a few years older than me, with bright red hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She didn't pry, but she had a way of getting me to talk without realizing it. One slow afternoon, as we folded shirts near the register, I found myself opening up about what had happened. "It's been a nightmare," I admitted, stacking a pile of sweaters. "I don't even know how my name got dragged into it. I've never done anything like that in my life." Mia paused, leaning against the counter. "That's rough," she said, frowning. "You said it was loans and fraud, right? Did you ever think, I don't know, maybe someone pretending to be you could have done it?" I stopped mid-fold, her words hitting me like a jolt. "Pretending to be me," I repeated, the idea foreign but oddly plausible. "I mean, I guess it's possible, but who would go to that kind of trouble?" She shrugged, tilting her head. "I don't know. Is there anyone who looks enough like you to pull it off?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with implication. For a moment, I couldn't answer. My mind flickered to the one person who fit that description perfectly. Eliza. But no, why would she do something like that? Still, the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake it. I hesitated, my hands frozen mid-fold. "There's my twin sister," I said slowly, the words tasting strange as they left my mouth. "We're identical, Eliza, but she would never do something like that. Everyone loves her." Mia raised an eyebrow, leaning her elbows on the counter. "A twin? Identical? Emma, come on. If someone's pulling this off, they'd need to look exactly like you. And you're telling me your twin is completely innocent?" I shook my head, the idea twisting my stomach. "She's always been the perfect one. My dad trusts her completely. Everyone does. There's no way she'd risk all that for something like this. Besides, why would she frame me?" Mia gave a short laugh, the kind that wasn't meant to be funny. "I don't know. Jealousy? Spite? You'd be surprised what people are capable of when they think they won't get caught. I mean, who better to impersonate you than someone who looks just like you?" Her words made me uneasy, but they also planted a nagging doubt in my mind. I didn't want to believe it, couldn't believe it, but the pieces started clicking together in a way I couldn't ignore. What if the person I trusted the most had been behind everything all along? That night, I lay awake in my tiny apartment, staring at the cracks on the ceiling. Mia's words echoed in my mind, refusing to let me rest. Who better to impersonate you than someone who looks just like you? Eliza had always been the center of attention, the one who could talk her way out of anything. And me, I was the quiet one, the easy target. But could she really do something so cruel? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos. There we were, Eliza and me side by side, practically mirror images. I remembered how she used to joke about how easy it would be to trick people. Back then, it seemed harmless, just her being playful. But now, it felt like those jokes were hiding something darker. As much as I didn't want to admit it, a part of me couldn't shake the possibility. If it was Eliza, she'd gone to great lengths to make sure I took the fall. And if that was true, I needed proof. I couldn't confront her or anyone else without evidence. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore, it was about finding the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, I made a decision. I wouldn't call my dad or Eliza, not yet. If there was even a chance Mia was right, confronting them without proof would only make things worse. Instead, I'd focus on finding answers. At work, I told Mia I wanted to look into it, unsure how she'd react. To my surprise, she grinned and clapped her hands together. Finally! I was wondering if you'd decide to fight back. Let me help, she said, her enthusiasm catching me off guard. You don't have to get involved, I said nervously, twisting a hanger in my hand. Don't be ridiculous. I live for this kind of stuff, Mia replied with a wink. Besides, 2 heads are better than 1, right? Let's start with the basics. Where did these fraud claims come from? Do you have any paperwork or details? I nodded, pulling a folder from my bag. I'd managed to keep copies of the notices that had been sent to my dad's house. Mia scanned through them, her eyes narrowing as she flipped the pages. Most of these are linked to loans and accounts, she said, tapping the papers with her finger. We should check where these were opened. Maybe there's a trail we can follow. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Mia's determination gave me strength, and together we began piecing together the puzzle. If Eliza or anyone else was behind this, we'd find out one way or another. It all started when court orders began arriving at my father's house. Each one more alarming than the last, they claimed I had defaulted on multiple loans, accounts I had no memory of opening. The accusations were official, and the weight of the legal threats hung over me like a storm cloud. Over the next few days, Mia and I worked tirelessly. During our lunch breaks and after shifts, we sat at her tiny kitchen table, combing through the paperwork and trying to track the accounts. She had a knack for details, noticing things I'd overlooked, like slight variations in handwriting and the locations where the accounts were opened. Look at this, she said one afternoon, sliding a document toward me. The signature here doesn't match yours exactly. It's close, but not identical, and all of these accounts they were opened in the next city over. I stared at the paper, my heart pounding. Eliza was in that city a couple of years ago. She said it was for a volunteer project. I paused, the words catching in my throat. Do you think... Mia leaned back in her chair, her expression serious. It's starting to look like someone used your name while they were there, and if she was the one spending time in that city, well... She let the sentence hang, the implication heavy. I swallowed hard. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but it's starting to feel like all the roads lead to her. Mia nodded. We'll need more. If she really did this, there'll be a bigger trail. Let's check for any transactions or other records linked to these accounts. Her confidence gave me the push I needed. I wasn't ready to accuse Eliza outright, but the pieces were falling into place. I could feel it. We were getting closer to the truth. The first place on the list was a small credit union on the edge of town. Mia and I stepped inside, the faint smell of paper and stale coffee lingering in the air. A young woman behind the counter glanced up and smiled. "Welcome back," she chirped. I froze. "Excuse me?" The woman's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, sorry, I thought you'd been in here before. You look so familiar." Mia shot me a quick look, but said nothing. I forced a smile and approached the counter. "Actually, I'm here about a loan that was opened in my name. I need to understand the details." The woman nodded, typing something into her computer. As her eyes scanned the screen, she frowned slightly. "Yes, I see the account. It was opened 2 years ago. You provided the documents in person, so we'll just need to verify a few details." "In person," I repeated, my voice shaking. "Yes," she said slowly, her gaze darting between me and the screen. "You brought your ID and signed the forms here, in the branch." She hesitated, then added, "It was during a quiet afternoon. I remember because we chatted briefly about how warm it was for that time of year." Mia leaned casually against the counter, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. "Is there any chance you could pull up a copy of those documents? We'd like to check everything carefully." The employee hesitated. "I can't let you take them, but I can show you the scans in the system." She turned the monitor slightly, and there it was. My name, my signature, and my face. Except it wasn't my face, not exactly. Mia stepped closer, her voice low. "Emma, that's your sister, isn't it?" My stomach dropped. The face on the screen was identical to mine, but with subtle differences. I couldn't deny it was Eliza. My hands trembled as the truth I'd been avoiding stared back at me. We visited 2 more locations that day, each experience eerily similar. At every bank or loan office, the employees acted like they knew me, greeting me with familiarity or referencing conversations I'd never had. At one office, a middle-aged man behind the desk even chuckled. "Back again? Didn't think we'd see you so soon," he said, shuffling through papers on his desk. I forced a polite smile, my stomach twisting. "Actually, I'm here about some discrepancies with an account opened in my name," I said carefully. His smile faded slightly, and he glanced up at me. "You're saying there's an issue, but you provided all the documentation yourself when you were here last month." Mia leaned forward, her tone casual but firm. "Was there any ID involved? Maybe you still have it on file?" The man frowned but nodded. "Of course, let me pull up the account." When the documents appeared on his screen, my heart sank. The face staring back at me from the ID was unmistakable. Eliza's face, wearing my name. My stomach churned as realization hit me like a freight train. It was Eliza, all along. The face on the ID, the signature on the forms, the confident way she'd carried out the scams. It was her. My twin sister, my own flesh and blood, had used our identical looks to steal my name, my identity, and leave me to bear the fallout. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my chest tightening with a mix of betrayal and rage. Mia placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, her expression a mix of sympathy and quiet fury. "She's been setting you up from the start," Mia said softly, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. I wanted to scream, to cry, to storm out of the room and demand answers from Eliza. But all I could do was sit there, frozen, as the full weight of what she'd done crashed down on me. My own sister had framed me, and my father had believed her without question. As we left the office, my mind raced, piecing together everything I had ignored or brushed off over the past year. Eliza's sudden obsession with high-end fashion, the designer handbags, the tailored coats, the expensive jewelry she'd flaunted at family dinners. I'd asked her once how she could afford it all, and she'd laughed it off, saying, "Oh, just a little treat for myself, you know. I've been saving up." At the time, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was always the one who had everything figured out. But now, those memories took on a sinister edge. The way she'd avoided specifics, the extravagant purchases that didn't match her modest job, the smug look she'd get whenever I questioned her success. It all made sense. She hadn't been saving up. She'd been using my name to fund her lavish lifestyle, leaving me to face the consequences. The next day, I met with a lawyer named David Cole, a calm, middle-aged man with a sharp gaze that seemed to see through every word. His office was modest but orderly, with files stacked neatly on his desk and a faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. "I've been notified that I defaulted on multiple loans," I explained, my voice steady despite the nerves bubbling under the surface. "I didn't mean for this to happen, but I need to understand the legal implications if I don't pay, or if I do." David leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands. "If you pay off the defaulted loans, it won't erase the records of the defaults, but it can prevent further legal action, like lawsuits or wage garnishments. However, your credit history will still show the defaults unless the lenders agree to remove them, which isn't guaranteed." I nodded, digesting the information. "And if I don't pay?" The woman nodded, typing something into her computer. As her eyes scanned the screen, she frowned slightly. "Yes, I see the account. It was opened 2 years ago. You provided the documents in person, so we'll just need to verify a few details." "In person," I repeated, my voice shaking. "Yes," she said slowly, her gaze darting between me and the screen. "You brought your ID and signed the forms here, in the branch." She hesitated, then added, "It was during a quiet afternoon. I remember because we chatted briefly about how warm it was for that time of year." Mia leaned casually against the counter, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. "Is there any chance you could pull up a copy of those documents? We'd like to check everything carefully." The employee hesitated. "I can't let you take them, but I can show you the scans in the system." She turned the monitor slightly, and there it was. My name, my signature, and my face. Except it wasn't my face, not exactly. Mia stepped closer, her voice low. "Emma, that's your sister, isn't it?" My stomach dropped. The face on the screen was identical to mine, but with subtle differences. I couldn't deny it was Eliza. My hands trembled as the truth I'd been avoiding stared back at me. We visited 2 more locations that day, each experience eerily similar. At every bank or loan office, the employees acted like they knew me, greeting me with familiarity or referencing conversations I'd never had. At one office, a middle-aged man behind the desk even chuckled. "Back again? Didn't think we'd see you so soon," he said, shuffling through papers on his desk. I forced a polite smile, my stomach twisting. "Actually, I'm here about some discrepancies with an account opened in my name," I said carefully. His smile faded slightly, and he glanced up at me. "You're saying there's an issue, but you provided all the documentation yourself when you were here last month." Mia leaned forward, her tone casual but firm. "Was there any ID involved? Maybe you still have it on file?" The man frowned but nodded. "Of course, let me pull up the account." When the documents appeared on his screen, my heart sank. The face staring back at me from the ID was unmistakable. Eliza's face, wearing my name. My stomach churned as realization hit me like a freight train. It was Eliza, all along. The face on the ID, the signature on the forms, the confident way she'd carried out the scams. It was her. My twin sister, my own flesh and blood, had used our identical looks to steal my name, my identity, and leave me to bear the fallout. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my chest tightening with a mix of betrayal and rage. Mia placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, her expression a mix of sympathy and quiet fury. "She's been setting you up from the start," Mia said softly, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. I wanted to scream, to cry, to storm out of the room and demand answers from Eliza. But all I could do was sit there, frozen, as the full weight of what she'd done crashed down on me. My own sister had framed me, and my father had believed her without question. As we left the office, my mind raced, piecing together everything I had ignored or brushed off over the past year. Eliza's sudden obsession with high-end fashion, the designer handbags, the tailored coats, the expensive jewelry she'd flaunted at family dinners. I'd asked her once how she could afford it all, and she'd laughed it off, saying, "Oh, just a little treat for myself, you know. I've been saving up." At the time, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was always the one who had everything figured out. But now, those memories took on a sinister edge. The way she'd avoided specifics, the extravagant purchases that didn't match her modest job, the smug look she'd get whenever I questioned her success. It all made sense. She hadn't been saving up. She'd been using my name to fund her lavish lifestyle, leaving me to face the consequences. The next day, I met with a lawyer named David Cole, a calm, middle-aged man with a sharp gaze that seemed to see through every word. His office was modest but orderly, with files stacked neatly on his desk and a faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. "I've been notified that I defaulted on multiple loans," I explained, my voice steady despite the nerves bubbling under the surface. "I didn't mean for this to happen, but I need to understand the legal implications if I don't pay, or if I do." David leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands. "If you pay off the defaulted loans, it won't erase the records of the defaults, but it can prevent further legal action, like lawsuits or wage garnishments. However, your credit history will still show the defaults unless the lenders agree to remove them, which isn't guaranteed." I nodded, digesting the information. "And if I don't pay?" "That's a different matter," he said. "The lenders could escalate to lawsuits to recover the funds. If they win, they could seek judgments against you, which might include seizing assets or garnishing wages. It could also hurt your ability to secure credit or loans in the future." His explanation was clear, but it left a sinking feeling in my stomach. Would paying them off at least help clear my name, even if the defaults stay on record? David tilted his head. "Considering it could show good faith that you're taking responsibility and trying to resolve the issue. But clearing your name entirely would require addressing how the loans came about in the first place. If there's any question of identity theft or fraud that would need to be investigated." I nodded, my heart pounding. I wasn't ready to bring up Eliza or the possibility of fraud, not yet. For now, I just needed to focus on what could be done and how much worse things could get if I didn't act. I hesitated for a moment before speaking. What if, hypothetically, someone had stolen my identity and used it to open those loans? Would that change anything? David leaned forward, his sharp gaze narrowing slightly. "If your identity was stolen, that's a serious matter. You wouldn't be legally responsible for the loans, but you'd need to provide evidence to prove you weren't the one who opened them. That typically involves filing a police report, notifying the lenders, and disputing the accounts with the credit bureaus." "And what happens if I can't prove it wasn't me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Then it becomes much more complicated," he replied. "The burden of proof is on you to show you didn't open the accounts. Without that, lenders will continue to treat you as the responsible party. But if you can gather any evidence, like being in a different location at the time or showing discrepancy in the application documents, it can make a big difference." I nodded, his words sinking in like weights on my shoulders. "So, paying them off wouldn't clear my name if they think I'm the one who opened the loans?" "Not entirely," David said. "It would stop the legal actions against you for defaulting, but the history of the loans and the assumption that you opened them would remain, unless you prove otherwise. If there's even a chance someone else is behind this, you need to investigate it now. The longer you wait, the harder it'll be to gather evidence." I nodded again, my mind racing. His advice made sense, but it also meant I couldn't avoid the truth forever. David's expression softened slightly as he leaned forward, his voice steady. "If you can prove that your identity was stolen and you weren't the one who opened those loans, you won't be held liable for the debts. The lenders will have to close the fraudulent accounts and stop pursuing you. Your credit report can also be corrected to remove the negative marks associated with those accounts." Relief flickered for a moment before another question crept in. And what happens to the person who stole my identity? That depends, David said, his tone firm. If you provide evidence of identity theft, it becomes a criminal matter. Law enforcement could get involved, and the person responsible could face charges for fraud, forgery, or other related crimes. Penalties could include fines, restitution to the lenders, or even prison time, depending on the severity of the case. I swallowed hard. So, if I come forward with proof, I'll be cleared, but the person behind this, they could face serious consequences. Yes, he said, meeting my eyes. But clearing your name is your priority. If someone close to you is responsible, I know it might feel complicated. But remember, this isn't just about money. It's about justice and protecting yourself from further harm. I nodded slowly, his words settling heavy in my chest. If it came to that, I'd have to make a choice. Protect the person who betrayed me or finally fight for my own truth. The decision weighed heavily on me, but I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth. Eliza had to face the consequences of what she'd done, not just for me, but for the family she had deceived so easily. I couldn't let her actions ruin my life, but at the same time, the thought of sending her to jail made my stomach churn. That's when the plan formed in my mind. I would confront her, but on my terms. My family used to have a big gathering every year at the family reunion. With everyone present, I'd lay out the proof of what she did. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to see the disappointment in our father's eyes, and to be held accountable for what she'd done to me. But I wouldn't turn her into the authorities, not if she agreed to make it right. Eliza would have to settle the loans she'd taken out in my name. She would fix this mess and take responsibility quietly, without dragging me through further humiliation or legal battles. It was a compromise, one that spared her the worst consequences while giving me the justice I deserved. The family reunion was only a week away. That gave me just enough time to gather everything I needed. Every document, every piece of evidence, every fact that would leave no room for her to deny what she'd done. This time, Eliza wouldn't talk her way out of it. She would face the truth, and so would everyone else. The days leading up to the reunion felt like a blur. Every spare moment was spent combing through the evidence I had gathered. Photos of the forged documents, bank statements, and even the recordings of the bank employees who had unwittingly confirmed Eliza's actions. Each piece fit together like a puzzle, building an undeniable case against her. Mia was by my side through it all, her relentless energy keeping me focused when the weight of it all threatened to crush me. "You've got this, Emma," she said as I packed the files into a neat folder the night before the reunion. "Just stick to the plan. Don't let her twist this around." I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I zipped the folder shut. "She's been doing this for so long, Mia. What if no one believes me? What if Dad sides with her again?" Mia placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "This time, you're not just speaking your truth, you're showing it. They can't argue with facts, Emma. You've done everything you can. Now it's time to let the truth do the rest." Her words stayed with me as I went to bed that night, my nerves tangled with anticipation. Tomorrow, everything would change, one way or another. The moment I stepped through the door, a wave of cold stares hit me like a slap to the face. Conversations halted mid-sentence, heads turned, and I felt the weight of 50 pairs of judgmental eyes boring into me. My heart pounded, but I straightened my shoulders and walked further into the room, refusing to let their disgust break me. Whispers followed me as I passed. "Can you believe she had the nerve to show up after everything she's done? Unbelievable." I heard she's being taken to court. The room was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in years, filling the space. My dad stood near the fireplace, talking to Uncle Richard, but when he saw me, his face darkened. Eliza, ever the actress, stood near the buffet table, surrounded by a group of cousins who hung on her every word. She glanced at me, her eyes narrowing slightly, but her expression quickly shifted into one of practiced pity. "Emma," Dad called, his voice clipped and cold. "I'm surprised you even showed up." I forced a polite smile and held my ground. "Of course I showed up. It's a family reunion, isn't it?" The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Eliza sauntered over, a drink in her hand, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's brave of you to come here after everything that's been going on," she said sweetly. "I know things have been difficult for you lately." I clenched my fists at my sides, my folder tucked securely under my arm. "You have no idea, Eliza, but that's why I'm here. I have something to say and I think everyone here deserves to hear it." The room went silent as her smirk faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of unease. This time I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. This time the truth would speak for itself. I stepped forward, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself think. The room fell into an uneasy hush, all eyes glued to me. I could see the disbelief, the anger, the pity in their faces. But I focused on Eliza. Her smug confidence was still there, but I noticed the faintest flicker of tension in her eyes. She knew something was coming. I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I know many of you have heard things about me recently, things that make me look like a liar and a thief. I've been accused of defaulting on loans I never took and ruining the family's reputation. It's hurt me deeply to think that so many of you believe I could do something like that." I paused, scanning the room, letting the silence settle. Eliza shifted slightly, her smile thinning. "But I didn't come here to plead my innocence with words alone. I came here with proof." I pulled the folder from under my arm and held it up. "Everything I'm about to show you is documented and verifiable. Bank statements, witness testimonies, even recordings from the places where these loans were supposedly taken out." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and I opened the folder, holding up the first document. A scan of the loan application with Eliza's forged signature and photo. "This is the application for one of the loans. The signature isn't mine. The photo ID, though it uses my name, isn't me, it's her." I pointed directly at Eliza. Gasps echoed through the room, and her confident facade cracked for just a moment before she quickly recovered. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice rising as she laughed nervously. "Why would I ever do something like that? Emma, this is desperate, even for you." But I didn't stop. I laid out every piece of evidence, the mismatched handwriting, the dates she'd been in the cities where the loans were taken out, the employees' descriptions of her. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, and the crowd turned their eyes to Eliza, their expressions shifting from pity for me to suspicion toward her. By the time I finished, the room was buzzing with tension. I looked directly at my father, his face pale, his eyes darting between me and Eliza. "Dad," I said, my voice softer now, "I know you don't want to believe this, but the truth is right here. She used my name, my identity, to fund her lifestyle, and I've been left to pick up the pieces." Eliza stepped forward, her voice shrill. "This is insane. She's lying, trying to turn everyone against me because she's jealous. You all know she's always been jealous of me." But the weight of the evidence spoke louder than her words, and for the first time I saw doubt flicker in the eyes of those who had always believed her. The room was filled with stunned silence as I finished speaking, my evidence laid bare for all to see. Faces that once held disgust and judgment now showed shock and disbelief, their gazes shifting from me to Eliza with growing unease. Whispers spread like wildfire, and I could see the shift, slow at first, but undeniable. They believed me. For the first time, the weight of their judgment lifted, replaced by the crushing realization of what Eliza had done. Eliza's face twisted with anger as the whispers grew louder, the weight of the evidence pressing down on her. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice sharp and trembling. "I don't have to stand here and listen to these lies." She shoved past the crowd, her heels clicking furiously against the floor as she stormed toward the door. "You're all pathetic for believing her," she shouted over her shoulder before disappearing into the night, leaving the room in stunned silence. As soon as the door slammed shut behind Eliza, the room erupted into a mix of murmurs and hesitant apologies. A few relatives approached me, their voices soft, laden with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Emma," one cousin said, her eyes welling with tears. "We had no idea." But I couldn't stay to listen. My heart raced as I turned and followed Eliza, pushing past the crowd. I needed to confront her alone. "Emma, wait!" my dad's voice called after me. I hesitated for a moment, then kept going. I heard his footsteps behind me as I stepped into the cool night air, scanning the parking lot for Eliza. There she was, fumbling with her car keys, her hands shaking as she tried to unlock the door. "Eliza!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the quiet lot. She froze, then turned to face me, her expression a mix of fury and panic. My dad caught up, his breath ragged, and looked between the two of us, confusion and anger etched on his face. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his voice breaking the tense silence. I stepped forward, my eyes locked on Eliza. "You're not running away from this. We need to talk, right now." Eliza's eyes darted between me and our dad, her panic barely concealed beneath her defiant glare. She crossed her arms, leaning against the car as if she could shield herself from what was coming. "Admit it, Eliza," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Tell Dad the truth about what you did, or I'll have no choice but to take this to the authorities." Her jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought she might lash out. But the weight of the situation was pressing down on her, and she knew it. "Eliza," Dad said, his voice shaking, filled with anger and desperation. "Is what Emma's saying true? Did you really do this?" Eliza scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Fine," she snapped, throwing up her hands. "Yes, I did it, okay?" I used her name for the loans. I didn't think it would get this far. I figured it would all blow over and no one would even notice. Dad staggered back a step, his face pale. "How could you? To your own sister, to this family." "I didn't think she'd be such a martyr about it," Eliza shot back, her voice cracking. "I needed the money, and she's always been flying under the radar. I thought she'd just take the heat and move on." I shook my head, my heart pounding. "You didn't just hurt me, Eliza. You destroyed my life, and I was ready to let you get away with it if you just owned up to it and fixed it. But if you don't settle those loans and clear my name, I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done, including the police." Eliza froze, the weight of my ultimatum hanging heavy in the air. For once, she had no comeback, no way to charm her way out of the mess she'd created. Eliza's defiance crumbled, her shoulders sagging as tears welled in her eyes. She looked down at the ground, unable to meet either of our gazes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant for it to get this bad. I didn't think it through." Dad stared at her, his expression a mix of disappointment and disbelief. "You didn't think, Eliza? Do you realize what you've done to your sister? To this family?" She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. "I'll fix it," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "I'll pay back everything. I'll settle the loans. I'll clear Emma's name. I swear, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I watched her carefully, searching for any hint of manipulation. But for the first time, Eliza looked genuinely ashamed. "You better mean that," I said, my voice firm but quieter now, "because if you don't, I won't hesitate to take the next step. This is your last chance, Eliza." She nodded frantically. "I do. I'll do it, Emma. I promise." Over the next few weeks, Eliza kept her word. She contacted the banks, paid off the defaulted loans, and provided statements clearing me of any involvement. It wasn't an easy process, and it didn't erase the damage overnight, but step by step, my name was restored. While I couldn't forget what she'd done, I felt a sense of closure. In the end, justice was served, not through revenge, but through accountability. Eliza's actions left scars, but they also gave me the strength to stand up for myself and reclaim my life. My family began to see me for who I truly was, not the person they had unfairly judged. Though trust with Eliza would take time, I found peace in knowing I had finally stepped out of her shadow and into my own light.